You just heard in the introduction, you heard a clip from the chairman of the Republican National Committee, soon to be, in fact, he's going to be White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, where he says, and Reince is his nickname, it's short for Reinhold, just in case you didn't know that. You may be wondering, why would someone name their kid Reince? Well, it's Reinhold Priebus. But he was speaking about the recent election and saying that the American people decided to put the Republican Party in charge, which they've done. I mean, and they've done it across the country because they're just fed up with the incompetence of Democrats when it comes to big programs and really even small programs. However, however, a lot of the battle that we deal with is versus, and we're seeing it play out on the national level, just events this week with President-elect Donald Trump and some of the fake news that has been employed against him and where that's coming from. But we're also seeing it at the state level with a development that's taken place the last couple of days in Boise, where Republican Heather Scott, who apparently is absolutely beloved by her constituents, she wins with huge margins, that the Republicans have decided they're going to take away all of her committee assignments because she said something that wasn't very nice to another member in the legislative lounge. Apparently, these people are so sensitive. Politicians always talk about having a thick skin, and then when something like this happens, they don't. I'm telling you right now, this is all this is all, to put it mildly, trumped up, and in both cases, trumped up, because they're looking to silence her. They're also looking to silence some of the newcomers who may be allied with her by saying, "This is what happens when you people don't fall into line. If you want to succeed here in Boise, here's what you have to do. You have to go sit over there in that corner, okay? And then if you keep your mouth shut and you go along to get along, every once in a while we'll throw you a little bit of taxpayer cake. That is what we've actually taken from the taxpayers. We'll turn around and you can take it back and you can renovate the Little League field in your hometown and say, gee, Willikers, I'm great. Vote for me." What they don't tell you is that taxpayer money. First of all, I make the old analogy. If your wife has a birthday, men, and you decide that you've got to get her a present, you grab a box and you open up a closet and you take out an old blouse that she already wears, once a week, and you wrap it up inside that box, put a little foil paper around it, and you hand it to her and you say, "Happy birthday, honey." Don't be surprised if she's not happy about it. Because this is how these things work. When they go around passing out all of these special favors to all of these members around the state, and "Oh, I've secured money." No, you took money from the big pot of gold that the leadership has that they allowed you to reach into because you kept your mouth shut, and you don't walk around telling people what they already suspect about how government runs. So what you did is you took some money that had been confiscated from the taxpayers and you recycled it in one of these projects in your hometown, and then told everybody, "Yes, well, we're moving forward here, and if you give me another 2 years and allow me to continue to hoover up large amounts of money from really well-heeled people across the state, I'll look out for you right after I look out for them." And I don't buy into this notion that they don't care about you. They do. But they have other priorities, and that usually are the people, that would be the people who actually bankroll their campaigns. That comes first, obviously, if you'd like to succeed often in politics. This was an issue at the national level. Trump found a way to go around that, got himself elected president. But at the state level, it's still somewhat critical if you're going to be. And so you've got all of these people, lobbyists and others who are, their organizations are donating to campaigns. You've got people with large businesses that are donating to campaigns. And then the politicians will say, "Well, it does not influence my vote." Well, then why are they giving you the money? I'm sorry, but they're giving you the money because it's not because you're the prettiest person around. "Gosh, I like your looks. Here's a large campaign contribution." It's not working that way. And so they're looking to silence people. And of course, when they take taxpayer money, they confiscate your money. And then they turn around and they build a new ball field or do something like that. What happens in politics is this. That money has to pass through all the bureaucrats and paper pushers. So they have to get paid. So maybe a dime out of every dollar that's collected for these projects actually is spent on the project after it all gets passed around in government. And by the way, all of those government workers, then they owe those same legislators fealty. That is, if you want your job, just keep going along to get along. And so it's a system that is designed to essentially take from you. Now, if we did this on our own, and more people are thinking this is the way to go, if we collected this all on our own and the kids went door to door with jars and filled them up with, you wouldn't have somebody having to give a cut to all of these different people along the line of government. But then government wouldn't have that long line of people dependent on it, would it now? Oh, I get it. So when a legislator goes to Boise and suddenly starts saying, hey, I'm going to pull back the curtain here so the public can see what's going on. No, 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 no. Not going to happen. And then I keep hearing all the establishment Republicans saying, well, these people aren't really Republicans. Define Republican for me. If they're about small government and honest government, and they're about an accountable government, isn't that a Republican virtue? Are all of those things, are there Republican virtues, right? All three? Then what's the problem when you say they're not Republicans? They may be more Republican than the leadership. I really was flattered when I was asked to be a delegate to the state convention last year. But I've been giving this a lot of thought over the course of the last several months. We got there, and all of a sudden you were given names of people to vote for, and there was no rundown. Well, we emailed them out this morning. Well, I'm sitting on a convention floor where I couldn't get internet service. How can I check my email? I don't know the backgrounds, so I'm given a choice. So most people were walking around asking their party leaders, well, then, geez, who should I vote for? You should vote for our candidate. Oh, I see. Excuse me, but this is kind of a fix if you think about it that way. And then when I started going to the local county meetings, and I finally stopped because what got me is you've got a lot of people who will come up to me one-on-one, and they'll tell me exactly how they feel. And they're not happy with the way things are. But then they go into the meeting at the local level, and they sit over in that conference room in County West, and everybody just pretty much falls into line. Why is that? Well, there's like a little kitchen room that sits in the back, and that's where all of the local party mandarins come in and sit. And they sit back there behind you, keeping an eye on what's going on, all back there with themselves, aside and apart from everybody else. You know what it reminds me of? During World War II, the Soviet Union was a country fighting for its survival, and the German army was advancing on fronts from north to south that were just massive. Well, the Soviets, or the Russians, if you like to call them that, they couldn't afford to keep retreating. Well, they could have, but the problem was a lot of their country was being scorched by the Germans as they advanced. Stalin, who didn't really have a lot of love for human life anyway, said, all right, I'm going to put a line of guys behind the frontline troops. And if the frontline troops are retreating, and sometimes a retreat does make sense, and it's a good strategy to regroup and find a better piece of territory to defend. But he just simply told all of these party apparatchiks, he said, if they come running back from the front and they're looking to regroup behind the lines, shoot them. And that's all I can think of. It's a similar type of dynamic that goes on in these local county meetings where you've got your back turned to the people behind you. They're the ones back there taking the little mental notes of who may step out of line, who may not step out of line. And it's very similar to the way that the Soviet army was running during those early days of World War II. In other words, those people are behind you to make sure that you do exactly what they want you to do, not what your conscience tells you to do. And I've gone along quietly about a lot of this for a very, very long time because, as I said yesterday, I still appreciate some of the votes that we have from our delegation. They've been very good when it comes to Second Amendment rights. These are important things if you live in this part of the country. They have done in this state a fairly good job of keeping a lid on taxes, although after the governor's State of the State address the other day, that's certainly going to be breaking down. The media, by the way, is applauding him for what he has done, saying, oh, he's going to spend a lot of money. That's a wonderful thing because, of course, liberals and media, that's redundant, and liberals all believe that you solve every problem by just throwing more cash at it. So they're thinking we're going to get what we want. Now, this is very similar to what's taking place on the national level. Pat Buchanan has a column today where he talks about how Donald Trump, this is what I mean by getting trumped. Donald Trump is being assailed by media. He's being assailed by Democrats and the intelligence community, all because they feel threatened by what he stands for. The intelligence community, they'll all be out of jobs if we're not constantly fighting wars with people all around the world. And Donald Trump doesn't see a need to keep fighting wars. He doesn't believe the United States should be the policeman of the world. So they're worried about that, so they'll do anything they can to try and embarrass him. Media is going along with it because media looks at it and says, maybe they'll stop Donald Trump because everything else we've tried hasn't done it yet. And the Democrats are going along with it because, well, again, everything else we've tried hasn't stopped Donald Trump. Maybe this will. So this has been the goal all along. And I would think even within the Republican Party, there are a lot of people thinking, yeah, he's threatening the gravy train here. I'll tell you what, if we get rid of him, Mike Pence will play along. Yeah, we'll go along with Mike Pence in this situation. This is what you see as a classic setup. Donald Trump is exactly right. Heather Scott is exactly right when she says this about what's going on in Boise right now. And so you've got these people in power, and they're not going to go easily, but they're being challenged now, and they're being challenged in many different places. Idaho, Washington, probably in some other state capitals as well. But I assure you, no matter where this happens, the response from the power brokers is always the same. How can we get rid of this thorn in our side? And you don't know at this stage of the game, there is so much at stake for them, just how far they are willing to go. I was reading about the violence that is planned for the inauguration next week, 1 week from today. And I'm telling you, the regular people in this country who got behind this notion that we needed a disruptor in government, a disruptor in chief, they are not going to be happy if someone does violence to their new guy. But I have this growing fear that if this intelligence community is that hot under the collar about Donald Trump, they may be doing something or planning something very, very violent and despicable. I don't think that happens on the state level. They don't necessarily need to go to those lengths. But this is what's happening across the board. I've got to take a short break. Bill Colley with you on Top Story today on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Quick note, we've got a guest coming in next Wednesday between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. It'll be Dr. Jonathan Tripp from Tripp Family Medicine right here in Twin Falls, Idaho. He'll be taking some of your telephone calls, and he'll also be talking about some medical issues that are very timely, that afflict us this time of year. Dr. Tripp, his office is looking for new patients. His office can often see a patient. I say often, that doesn't mean always, but often see a patient on the very same day if you call up with a medical issue that needs some attendance, if you will. And, of course, you can find Dr. Tripp's office on Fillmore Street, directly across from the main post office in Twin Falls. And remember, life's too short not to feel good. We've got a balmy 12 right now at 20 minutes after 8 o'clock. I wanted to mention we have some talk about the Second Amendment and firearms and gun safety, all of that coming up in hour number 2 of the program today. We do this every Friday morning right here on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. We're up to 13 at 8:23. Look, I'm told that the weather is going to get better, April or so. I wanted to mention for those folks who are listening today, if you're struggling to hear the radio, then it may be more than just your radio or the signal or anything like that. Could be that you're dealing with some hearing loss that you may not even be aware of. And we've been recommending for quite some time on this program, that means you need to get in touch with Mount Harrison Audiology and Dr. Christine Pickup, a doctor of audiology. She'll be opening your world to new sounds. If you're willing to go along with this, she has a new hearing device that's on the market. And it helps you hear more naturally than any previous aid. She's offering a free 2-week trial, there we go, with the new devices. And you can call today and schedule your personal fitting appointment. Open your world to better hearing. Dr. Pickup's number at Mount Harrison Audiology, 312-0957. That's 312-0957. I wanted to mention a couple of quick things about this whole Trump story, too, as well, because, as I said, we're seeing it now on state and national levels where there is this effort to try and destroy various candidates. Because, but they said something that wasn't very nice. Yeah, well, is it true? That's Was it true? That's the important question. Not what they said, but is it true? Not how they said it. Is it true? And again, politicians, I said earlier, claim to have thick skins, but they don't. I remember years ago, I was working in this big city, and the local liberals created something called a Citizen Review Board to look into police matters. Now, you already had a city council that did that, but the liberals wanted to try to interfere with the situation as much as they could. What's new? Well, the local police union advised officers don't go before it. Police management agreed with the union, which isn't always, sometimes they're at loggerheads, but they agreed and said, don't testify. And most officers said, I'm sure as heck not going to go before that board because they're just going to be trying to, harm the police department. Well, finally, one officer decided that he was going to do it. Within a week, he was fired from his job. Why? Because one day he was getting out of his car in the police parking garage and he was carrying a bag with him. It was related to something he was working on. And the parking lot attendant, who he knew really well, said, "Hey, what are you up to today?" And he said, "Oh, if I told you, I'd have to kill you." Now, that's a joke, and it's from an old movie. And, but they said, "Oh, he threatened to kill one of his coworkers, so he's been fired." They were just looking for something like that, and they took it out of context. And that's how these situations often work. And it's when Trump said that this is like Nazi Germany the other day, and what's going on with Heather Scott could pretty much be classified in the same way. It's using that sort of thing, taking something out of context, mixing it with some disinformation. When it was said yesterday that Heather Scott sometimes gives people dirty looks in hallways at the state legislature. Yeah. And your problem is? Well, speaking of Trump's situation, Glenn Greenwald, who's a liberal journalist, made an appearance last night with Tucker Carlson on the Fox News channel. Greenwald admits he doesn't like Trump, but he says that liberals, along with media and along with the intelligence community, are now colluding against Donald Trump, and it's very dangerous.
You see Democrats at this point, even liberals, more or less openly calling for and cheering for the intervention of the CIA, the intelligence community, the overall deep state, hoping that because they failed to do so, that this unelected faction in Washington will undermine and subvert and destroy the legitimacy of Donald Trump's presidency before he's even inaugurated. And I think what you're seeing is actually quite dangerous. There really is, at this point, obvious open warfare between this unelected but very powerful faction that resides in Washington and sees presidents come and go on the one hand, and the person that the American democracy elected to be the president on the other, who's supposed to be its chief executive. And there's clearly extreme conflict and a lot of subversion taking place.
Subversion. In other words, the will of people in flyover country is being subverted. Carlson, very curious about this, then asks, why are the spooks, that is the intelligence community, so anxious to get Donald Trump and get him out of the way?
So you write correctly, I think, that the CIA in particular was openly against Trump going back a full year. Why is that, do you think? Why did they oppose Trump?
I think there are a lot of reasons. I think the number one foreign policy priority of the CIA over the last 4 to 5 years has been the proxy war they're waging in Syria to remove Bashar al-Assad, and Hillary Clinton was quite critical of Obama for constraining them. She wanted to escalate that war, to unleash the CIA, to impose a no-fly zone in Syria to confront Russia, whereas Trump took the exact opposite position. He said we have no business in Syria trying to change the government. We ought to let Russia and Assad go free, and killing ISIS and al-Qaeda and whoever else they want to kill. He was a threat to the CIA's primary institutional priority of regime change in Syria. Beyond that, Clinton wanted a much more confrontational and belligerent posture toward Moscow, which the CIA has been acrimonious with for decades, whereas Trump wanted better relations. I think they viewed Trump as a threat to their institutional preeminence, to their ability to get their agenda imposed on Washington.
Glenn Greenwald speaking on Fox News Channel with Tucker Carlson last night. Look, I'll postpone the phone calls until the next segment of the program because I'm down to less than a minute, and it wouldn't be fair to my caller to just say, hey, how you doing? Good to hear from you. All right, talk to you soon. Bye-bye. So if you could be patient, give me a shout just after the break in a couple of minutes here. I do also want to mention my good friends at Waddell & Reed. They're an investment firm operating here in Twin Falls, and they've been operating now for 80 years. Can you imagine that? 80 years. If we should live that long. One of the oldest firms in the country to offer mutual funds, and Waddell & Reed owns and manages 2 of those mutual fund families, and they invest with a conservative nature. they try to take a more of a planning approach. That is, and long term, really, a look at each puzzle of the puzzle or a puzzle of the pie that the clients have when they come in, because everyone out there is an individual. And what I have in my goals for the next 15 to 20 years may be different than what you have as well. They will build a plan to match those goals and those needs. They'll help you then manage the money. And at Waddell and Reed, they take planning personally.